on the computer screen. It does indeed. So, can we go home? It's really 7 now? 7:02. Okay. You ready, Rudy?
Yes, ma'am.
Let's call the Apache Junction Planning and Zoning Commission to order. It's Tuesday, November 13th, 2018. It's now 7 o'clock. If you'd please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We did.
I started to. Wasn't there. Roll call, please, Rudy.
Commissioner Schroeder.
Present.
Vice Chair Heck.
Present.
Commissioner McGraw.
Here.
Commissioner Kreidler.
Here.
Commissioner Uli.
Here.
Chairwoman Nesser.
Present.
Commissioner Howard.
Here.
All present. We have a quorum, Madam Chair.
Okay. We'll move on to the consent agenda, and I'll call for a motion on the consent agenda.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I move that the Planning and Zoning Commission accept the agenda as presented.
Okay, can I have a second?
Second.
And now that we have a second, is there any discussion on the motion? No one has anything? Okay, hearing none. Rudy, would you please do roll call, please?
Vice Chair Heck.
Yes.
Commissioner McGraw.
Yes.
Commissioner Kreidler.
Yes.
Commissioner Uli.
Here.
Chairwoman Nesser.
Yes.
Commissioner Howard.
Yes.
Commissioner Schroeder.
Yes.
So moved, Madam Chair.
Okay. We'll move on to the public hearings. The first,
No, we didn't approve the minutes.
that was the consent agenda.
You didn't.
The minutes?
You didn't add that.
I know, but didn't we just do it by doing the consent agenda altogether?
The consent agenda includes both items. In the past, I know we've kind of been breaking them up, but
I thought you were breaking it up to ask individually if that.
Yeah, so if you want to go back, if anybody
Okay.
wants to make comments, you can redo the motion if you
We'll
want.
do it that way then. I won't do it this, I'll ask for a motion on consideration of approval of the agenda,
On the minutes.
Are the minutes?
or on the minutes, I mean.
Madam Chair, I think you can ask for approval of the consent agenda,
Yeah,
and you can get a second, and then you can ask for discussion, and then someone can talk about the agenda, or they can talk about the minutes at the same time, rather,
Okay.
otherwise we'll go back,
back and forth.
and, well, I'm saying we would take the minutes off the consent agenda. If we're gonna talk about them every time, then the consent agenda would be the agenda, and then we would have another item, number 5, I guess, which would be the minutes as a separate item.
You could
I'd like
just
to
take the
start.
consent agenda off and just call for approval of the agenda as one item and approval of the
I think
minutes.
historically, we've had a consent agenda, so, but I think you can make a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented. Someone can second that, and then the chair can ask for discussion. If someone wants to talk about the consent agenda, or the agenda, or the minutes, that's when they say, is there any discussion, then anybody can. So I think you're supposed to have a motion on the floor, and then a second, and you open it up for discussion.
Madam, if I may, Madam Chair,
Yeah,
I think you've already voted on the consent agenda.
and that includes both.
It does. It's been approved. I think you can move on.
Okay. Maybe it's my fault. I didn't specifically mention the minutes, that's all.
Madam Chair,
Yes,
on the agenda, it is in two separate numbers. 18-480 is consideration of the approval of the agenda. 18-481 is the approval, or consideration or approval of regular minutes for October 23rd, 2018. So based on that, it looks like two separate items that both need to be addressed. Madam Chair, if I may,
yes.
number 4 says consent agenda. Under number 4 are 2 items. The matter has been approved. I recommend you move on.
Okay, we'll move on then to the public hearings. And next time, we will call them as 2 separate items. Public hearing, first one is presentation, discussion, public hearing, and consideration of case PZ-2-18 by Amerco Real Estate Company and U-Haul International.
Madam Chair, a very short presentation tonight. You may recall, last month or so, Amerco Real Estate came before you with a general plan amendment and with a concurrent rezoning request. The item that had a timing issue was the general plan amendment. Under our general plan guidelines, they can only be approved once a year, so if we miss the date in September, then they wouldn't be able to hear it again until next year. The general plan amendment was approved by City Council. You may recall, Mr. Pollock asked for a continuance on the rezoning. I think it was back at the meeting of September, Mr. Pollock requested that the rezoning, PZ 218, be continued to tonight's meeting, November 13th. He also went to the City Council and asked the City Council to continue their public hearing as well, and we're going to City Council next week on the 20th to present the exact same request for another continuance. Over the past couple of months, we have been working with our active transportation plan consultant, J2, to come up with some cross-sections. You may recall, Mr. Pollock, one of the things he discussed at the public hearing was they wanted a little more time to see exactly what the city wanted, to better make a feasibility. You know, if we want a 75-foot half right-of-way, what's it going to look like? Well, once again, we've been working with J2 to come up with some cross-sections. We have presented those to Amerco. We have also discussed or answered some of the other questions that they had since we last met. And at this time, they would like another continuance to your meeting in February 12th, and they're also going to ask the City Council for a continuance of the council meeting until February 20th. Now, why those dates? Well, Amerco, I'm sorry, not Amerco, J2 is going to take the active transportation plan to City Council for approval on January 15th. So I think one of the big items is they want to make sure that council approves that plan, see what the final cross sections end up looking like, so then they're working with fresh information.
So you're saying, because that was going to be my question, was that's what was the reason for U-Haul wanting the continuance? Was
Yes, ma'am.
they're just wanting to
right.
wait on what J2 does?
Yes, and they also want to have some more time to review some of their options with regard to the more specific conditions that we have emailed back and forth on here in the last couple of months.
Okay,
There has been a lot of communication in the last couple of months.
okay. Anyone else have any questions of Rudy?
Madam Chair.
Yes.
Rudy, I just want to make sure that we're not falling into any violation of Title IX, ARS Title IX, as far as the amendments or anything or continuations on this? Because I know we continued it. It was supposed to be done by the second meeting in September, and I know we continued it, but I just want to make sure that should this be passed to continue it to February, that we're not violating state law or anything like that.
Well, once again, the item that had to be decided in September was the general plan amendment. And that you did make your recommendation, and the City Council did approve the general plan amendment. The rezoning can be continued to any date certain. So we're fine. We're not violating, we're not in jeopardy of any timing issues with the general plan.
Okay, just want to make sure of that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Peter?
Thanks, Madam Chair. So Rudy, has Amerco given any indication on how much time they're looking for?
At this point, they've asked continuance till after the J2 plan is approved, and looking at the calendar and figuring out which was the soonest public meeting we could bring it back to both you and council, that's where we came up with the dates in February.
Okay, so then we will have to vote to continue it?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Okay,
To a
and
date
do I need to give a date certain?
Yes.
Yes.
I do.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think we mentioned it in our cover memo. If you so desire, you would continue your public hearing to February 12th, and then next week, the city council would continue their public hearing to the 19th, I think it is.
Does anybody else down this way have any questions?
No, my question was
Anybody here? Okay. So I'll ask for a motion to oh, this is a public hearing? Yeah. Oh, yeah.
He wants to
Duh, I even said that. Does anyone in the public wish to make any comments? Anyone? Hearing none? Okay, we'll close the public section. Any discussion? Then I'll call for a motion.
Madam Chair,
Yes?
I move that the Planning and Zoning Commission continue case PZ-2-18 by Amerco Real Estate Company and U-Haul International LLC, represented by David Pollock, to a date not to exceed February 12th, 2019.
We have is that the right date? February 12th? Okay.
Yep.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Roll call vote, please, Rudy?
Commissioner McGraw,
Yes.
Commissioner Kreidler,
Yes.
Commissioner Uli,
Yes.
Chairwoman Nesser,
Yes.
Commissioner Howard,
Yes.
Commissioner Schroeder,
Yes.
Vice Chair Heck.
Yes.
So moved, Madam Chair.
Okay. We have no old business, so we'll move on to new business. Presentation and discussion on case PZ-3-18 by AJ40 LLC and ITOW LFP, represented by Dan Kauffman of Kauffman Homes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is a discussion-only item this evening. This is, the reason we thought this particular item was worthy of a work session or a new business discussion is because it's south of Baseline. We don't have a whole lot of development south of Baseline with the exception of the Public Works Yard, the landfill, the sewer district facility. We have a new water company facility, but basically, and of course there's that industrial county island, but basically everything else around this particular site is state land, state trust land. So about a year ago, a little less than a year ago, we met with some folks, the current owners, who came in and asked about possibly doing a sand quarry, you know, rock and sand mining operation, and they showed us some examples of some other operations they've done around the Phoenix area. And basically the idea is to excavate the 40 acres for, I forget how many years they said, but then after they had finished excavating it, then they would refill it with inert material, broken construction debris, that kind of stuff. But basically the land would remain unbuildable. You could probably do a storage lot on top of it or something of that effect, maybe a passive recreational use, but you really couldn't put any buildings on top of a property once it's been used like that because there's a lot of stability issues. So we met with the folks and weren't too excited about the proposal. You know, they have been trying to do something with the property for a number of years. So we said, well, gentlemen, we're not too thrilled about the plan to turn this into a rock quarry, but, you know, we will do everything we can to help market the property, maybe for residential development. And as luck would have it, there were, Larry did some good outreach into some of the folks who have built homes here in the community, and two developers were interested in the property, and ultimately Mr. Kauffman, who has done many projects in the city, was the successful bidder or applicant, whatever you want to call him, and he's currently under contract to buy the 40 acres from the owners. The property is currently zoned industrial. It has been zoned industrial since it was under county jurisdiction. I believe our annexation of the property occurred in 95. However, old county zoning maps show that the property was actually rezoned to industrial way back in 1980. So it was zoned industrial, apparently never developed. I've never seen a development plan for it. It's sat all these years, once again, completely surrounded by state trust land, which is zoned RSGR, our low-density residential zone. So you had a 40-acre piece kind of out in the middle of nowhere with no development, and an easement, that being the South Cortez Road alignment to the property. It's a little bit less than a quarter mile south of Baseline, and it would fall on the east side of the Cortez alignment. So Mr. Kauffman, once again, as I mentioned, has built many single-family home neighborhoods here in the city, and he's looking at this property to do the same. We have in your packets a conceptual plan, and which is actually doubles as the pre-plat, and this evening I've given you a blow-up of the plan, which is this drawing here. And basically, Mr. Kauffman is proposing a single-family home subdivision of about 259 lots. This property is south of Baseline, so there are different engineering standards that are going to apply to property south of Baseline. And what I mean by that is north of Baseline, I believe we apply the 10-year, 24-hour storm for retention purposes. Okay. South of Baseline, I'm not exactly sure what the number is, but I know it's a lot more. The 100-year storm. Okay, so more certainly in the form of engineering, on-site retention, and those types of things. At first glance, the community offers accommodation through the washes through the site. Larry, if you can go back maybe one slide. You'll see that there are a couple of washes that traverse the property, one kind of down the middle in this fashion, which they have accommodated in their plan, and then there's another little wash that nips the corner up at the northwest corner. But these are not FEMA flood zones. They are minor tributaries. However, we were happy to see that they took our suggestion and incorporated the open space, the wash, into the design. They're basically offering 3 different types of lot sizes. Of course, like in all Mr. Kauffman's communities, there will be resident amenities, a clubhouse, a pool, a dog park. I believe in his narrative he mentions a couple of the things that they would be offering. And a couple of other interesting things. There is also some external connectivity to hiking opportunities to the west and to the south. If you look between lots 31 and 32, you will see a tract there, which is actually a trail that's going to lead out of the subdivision, take you down Siphon Draw. Once again, some nice hiking and biking opportunities. And then on the south side of the development, in Tract D, there is also a connectivity trail to properties beyond. As far as the layout of the subdivision, the west 40 feet would be dedicated for a public road. The north 40 feet would be dedicated for a public road. Right now, there aren't any neighborhoods to the east, the west, north, or the south, but in the future, there will be. So the idea here was to create a public right-of-way for future connectivity. The internal streets will be private streets, sidewalk on one side. It is a gated community. I think we mentioned that they're going to offer at least 3 lot sizes. And this evening on your desks, I have provided you with Mr. Kauffman's proposed models. He's got about 14 of these. Don't necessarily know that all of these are going to fit in all the lots. Hopefully, when we come back to you in a couple of weeks, we will have a lot exhibit that shows which units will fit on which lots. But typically, the RS5 PD zoning district allows a setback of 20 feet on the front, 15 feet on the rear, 7 feet on the sides. So that kind of lends itself a little more to the smaller lot design. And beyond that, Madam Chair, of course, we'll be making all our normal, recommending all our normal conditions of approval, including who's maintaining the streets, who's maintaining the internal streets, the need for an HOA, and memorializing what the setbacks are going to be, the minimum number of model types, and resident amenities. We have done a little analysis. This request does conform with our general plan. Basically, our general plan designates everything south of Baseline as a master plan community area. Some of you may recall back when we were working with the Portales folks, and the 2010 general plan was also right around the same time. And the idea was to create a land use category that would allow for all kinds of uses. Master plan community normally means that you're working with large tracts of land, and including your residential, your multifamily, your commercial, your employment centers, your open spaces, so we don't have a conflict with the general plan. Zoning, 40 acres, once again, it's an odd piece of property completely surrounded by state land. Industrial zoning, not necessarily the best neighbor for low-density residential, but we all know that those are holding zones that they would change in the future. And we hope that this is the spark, which gets finally development south of Baseline going. They do have an easement across Cortez Road. We are currently working with the folks at the State Land Department to rededicate that easement over to the city, because right now it's dedicated to the county. And we have also informed Mr. Kauffman and his engineer of another odd easement that kind of runs east-west through the property. Apparently that was a private easement created amongst the owners, so that will go away as well, and will allow then for the proposed street pattern. The infrastructure, of course, the developer will put in all of the necessary infrastructure. Cortez, his half of Cortez and his half of Kilauea Avenue would be constructed to a public standard. The internal streets would be private streets constructed to a different standard. And then from the northwest corner of the property up to baseline, that is going to more or less be a temporary road type of a structure, maybe like a double chip seal with some Maricopa edge, or because in the future, once the State Land Department disposes of those lands, then a future developer would develop Cortez Road to a normal street standard. So it'll provide decent access to the property and serve the residents of the neighborhood. Public input, there's only one surrounding landowner. They have not expressed any opposition to this rezoning. And at this point in time, Madam Chair, we've got some graphics to show you. Unfortunately, we still can't get very clear graphics, but I'd be happy to answer any questions at this time.
Rudy, it's not so much a question as much as I'd like to hear where the city is thinking on this. Years ago, our minimum lot sizes were 7,000 square feet, correct? And now this is saying lot sizes of 3,600, 4,000, 4,500 square feet lot sizes, which we've been approving a lot. And I'm not saying that's always bad, because I'm kind of a proponent of smaller lots for people who want them. And I know Dan Kauffman's going to build good homes. He does in the town, and I think it's good. But my comment and my question to the city is, over here on the page 5 of 5 of your, it says where it's the discussion item only. You state that, where it says, especially since this is in many ways a pioneer project, the city's first family subdivision south of baseline. And this is the spark that's going to entice all these other developers to come to Apache Junction and build south of the 60. Should we really be looking at real small houses or lot sizes? Or would we be sending a message to all these developers that they can just come in, all they want is little dinky lots with little box houses sitting on them? I mean, I understand it's an opportunity, but is that the best way to use an opportunity? So why is the city looking at this, that this is this new opportunity, but going with small lots?
Well, that's a great question, Madam Chair. Last time we updated the zoning ordinance, we didn't have anything smaller than a 7,000 square foot lot size single-family zone. And as of 2014, we now have a 5,000 square foot lot zone for conventional homes only. However, the reality is, over the years, and the current trend seems to be to request smaller lots. For everything that we're hearing is people like the idea of smaller yards or less yard to maintain. They still get a nice big home, but less yard to have to deal with. I mean, it's a great question, and it's a policy question. In this particular case, we didn't want a quarry, and maybe in that sense we compromised to some extent, but I don't think we've compromised beyond what we've done with other projects. And certainly, as part of any plan development proposal, there are the trade-offs: the nice clubhouse, the swimming pool, the dog park, and the other resident amenities, the walking trails, the sidewalk on one side. So, I mean, ultimately, I guess it's a question for Commission and Council: are the trade-offs worth the idea of going down to 3,500 square foot lots? At what point it pencils out for the developer, that's a question for Dan.
Okay.
I just wanted to point out a couple things too. I think these lots ended up being not much bigger, but I think his other lots are about 3,300 square feet. So these range like 36, 39 up to 45. So these are bigger than I think some of the lots he has at Stagecoach and at Belagave. The other thing to note too was that historically developers, if there's a wash through the property, they would basically reroute it so it would go around the perimeter of the property. So I think part of the thing, so lot size, I think, is a good thing to discuss, but I wanted to talk in general. If you look at the plat, you see a system of trails inside to try to use the wash as it is, as an amenity, rather than relocate it and put it in a channel. So now he can back lots up to the wash and have some backyards anyway separated, have some trails along that wash, have some trails south to where people could walk on a path to get to the pool. Originally, he was going to have 2 pools. He was going to have 2 different gates, but yet not really call it a over 55 community or have, so it looked like 2 developments. So I think with some discussion with him, we convinced him you don't need to have a pool that's adults over 18 and then another pool for families. So now he's kind of come back and said, well, yeah, we'll just build 1 pool, we'll build 1 clubhouse. He'll build some amenities. I think the other thing he's seen, whether that carries out in the long term or not, but that the lots at Stagecoach that are not age restricted he's building more houses sooner, if you will, at the non-age restricted community. Now maybe the other one will catch up this winter when winter visitors are here and might buy a lot. But I think we wanted, he can still market, anybody can buy it. You can be over 55, you can be over 75, buy a house, or you can be a young family. So I think he wants something to that. So the other thing is, we were looking at this, that it's kind of the hole in the donut. So rather than just have a walled community that who knows how long it's going to be, if we want to connect it to the active transportation plan, as Rudy mentioned on lot 31, there's you know, a public easement, if you will, through there, that just because it's gated doesn't mean that it's like totally walled off, that it does have to interact with the neighborhoods around it. Ultimately, we want to see some connection maybe in the southeast, which might be reserved for a water well site, but that would get you over to Siphon Draw. You could hike up Siphon Draw and you could be at Silly Mountain, and it's a quarter mile from this subdivision. So I think it's different in that how he was open to some of the ideas. So when he came in and, you know, here's a formula, here's what's worked at Jacob's Ranch, here's what's worked at Stagecoach or Bella Gave. So he was open to keeping the wash where it is. I think it saves him money than having to relocate it, building some trail systems through there. That's kind of the large context, but yes, I think we also tried to push him in the direction of some larger lots, and this is kind of he also knows what sells in today's marketplace, and so he's also trying to cater to various household types that might want a small yard, 4,500 square feet, and then still have this open space and amenities, but you still have a yard. So anyway, that's the larger picture I was trying to provide there. But still, it's a good question is, you know, are we going to say we're not going to stray from 5,000, that's it? So.
I just wanted to kind of feel out what I mean, it's not just you two, it's the whole city, which direction we're going, so. Comments, discussion, anyone else?
Yeah.
Madam Chair.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead, Steve.
I'm concerned or curious as to any potential issues that may arise with the landfill being so close. Has that been discussed, or is there any potential for problems there?
I did discuss that briefly with Mr. Kauffman. I mean, he is fully aware that the landfill is, you know, half a mile downwind. And we did discuss the closure date, and I guess he waited, you know, and like any other land use decision he would make, and he chose to go with the property. So yes, that has been discussed, not in great detail, but we have had a discussion about that, and he's willing to develop anyway.
Okay, so no major concerns then off the top of
Not
this?
that I'm aware
Okay.
of, no.
Very good.
Peter?
Madam Chair. So Rudy, I know the state land department they control most of the land around this. It seems as though from what I'm reading that they are amenable to this and that they at some point in time intend to sell off that land, presumably to developing residential properties, not something else that's
Yes.
not compatible?
Yes, you may recall, well, it's been about 5-10 years now, but once again, a little bit ago, I mentioned the Portales proposal. That was for property about 1,000 acres east of the canal, and it went so far as to envelop the landfill. This property is a little farther east. Right now, there are some folks who are interested in land west of the canal. I know Bryant and Larry have had discussions with the folks at State Land Department and with some other interested parties. And yes, we hope that State Lands, sees this as the opportunity to piggyback and let loose some of that land, because, I mean, quite honestly, our future is to the south.
Right.
And we've been having discussions with them for a very long time. Larry, maybe you know something more recent than I do, but
Well, yeah, we talked to one of the state planners, Michelle Green, and when this idea came up of a quarry, sand and gravel pit, whatever we were gonna call it, and then put inert material back in, they also talked about kind of recycling asphalt. And so bringing asphalt in, grinding it up, crushing it up, concrete, hauling asphalt away. And Michelle was very, I guess, not supportive. I mean, the land was zoned industrial, and in theory, they could have done a lot of things that didn't need rezoning and may not need water, sewer, et cetera. So I think the state was excited that this was gonna be residential and not industrial, so.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Rudy, does the city have any input as to potential developers that the state might consider, first and foremost, going into that land?
yes, we would be involved in a joint planning process with them, absolutely. The way it worked last time, and I imagine the way it's going to work this time as well, is it's basically the State Land Department, whoever the successful bidder is, and the city would all be working together to develop what the land use plan is going to look like south of Baseline.
Okay.
And even with the initial developer, before they bid, has to do some upfront planning, and we will be part of that process every step of the way.
Okay. Reason why I asked that question, we could have the best plans going forward, and all of a sudden there's a change of people in the state land office, and all of a sudden what we thought was going to happen, because we don't have as much input as we thought we would have, things change.
Right.
And so if you feel confident that we will have some input, and at least our input will be considered, okay?
Well, that you hit it right on the head. That is a risk, and that happened to some extent last time. But I think in the end, the core people were there, and with the Portales plan, we got about 90% of the way there. And I don't think it was so much the folks who were in office at the time as it was the economy that basically doomed that plan. So as long as we've got a good plan, we're all working towards the same goal. I don't think that'll be too big of an issue.
Okay.
Ms. Hooley?
Rudy,
Yes, ma'am.
I have a couple of questions for you. I'm looking at the sewer pumping station.
Yes, ma'am.
Where is that going to be located?
I believe it's going to be down in Tract D
Down in here.
at the southwest corner, and they're going to put a lift station there, because right now the sewer main is up on Baseline.
Okay.
So they will be pumping uphill, and coincidentally, the water district is also looking at having a facility in the development, and they will probably be located closer to the southeast corner. So there's a tract set aside for the sewer district. I think the water district is still in negotiations where the most ideal spot for that water station as well.
Thank you. And I want to commend you and the planning staff, because I live out there, and I am wholly encouraged about the development that's going to be going out that way.
Great.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
Rudy, a couple questions. The distance of chip seal from Broadway to this community, how far is that?
It's about 1,000 feet. It's a little less than a quarter mile.
And how long do you think it'll take before I'm just thinking chip seal that's going into this new home, this new development. How long do you think it's going to take before they switch it over to asphalt?
Well, that depends on the State Land Department, how quickly they elect to dispose of some of the surrounding properties. But I don't think it's going to be a single coat. I think we discussed with Emil and with Mr. Bargalow, the engineer, at least double chip seal. And I don't.
And we were gonna put a side path along here too, I think 8 or 10 foot side path, has to be in 40 feet in this easement, so not only, I think there'd be 32 feet, so something on the side so folks could walk up to Baseline Road, or vice versa, I suppose.
So there's no time frame for
No,
getting rid of the, okay.
Not specific.
no.
Thank
And I would think if the developer's not selling homes, then they may want to go in and kind of dress it up a little bit. But since he doesn't own it and it's on this easement, then I think he's going to do the middle, make the development happen and dress it up to the point where he can sell homes.
Okay, Robert?
No, no questions.
Okay, thank you, Rudy.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
I just wanted to point out on this aerial too, you can see just to the east of this property, that is really the siphon draw wash. And so that's why we were trying to, if that is part of our active transportation plan for future corridors, that as development would happen around it, then folks could get out of this property and go to a trail, regional trail.
Okay,
Okay, Madam Chair.
okay.
So I have a question about the amenities. You said one of the original plans, he had like two pools?
Yeah, he has one now. Originally, he wanted to not call it age-restricted and then have a pool that was age-restricted, and we said, that sounds awful lot like an age-restricted community. He came around and decided to end up with one, I think, 2 community areas or more amenities and sprinkled throughout rather than, but just one pool.
Just one pool? 'Cause I mean,
Yeah.
am I seeing, what, 273 lots, right around that number?
259.
The pre-plat shows 259, his narrative says 265. He might have been working off of, this is actually the third draft of this plan that we have seen. It's come along a little bit since his first proposal, but his latest plan shows 259. His narrative mentions a clubhouse, pool, dog park, putting green, basketball, pickleball courts, and other recreation areas.
So like reasonable that if this is all done, there could be 1,000 people living in this neighborhood
Possibly.
with
One chip seal road.
in one pool. So I was just curious, if he originally had 2, but he didn't want, why couldn't he have the 2 but not have an age restriction?
Well, I think this new one's a larger pool. I think rather than have 2 smaller pools, this one's,
Olympic?
I don't know if it's Olympic size.
Watering hole.
You know, what we could do is ask,
Well, again, if you have questions or comments, we'll get them to Dan. It's going to come back in a couple weeks, so
Yeah.
we want to make sure that if you have questions or comments, we can ask him, or he'll know that there were questions about the lot size, some of the amenities, the size of the pool and things like that.
Well, I was more curious about the amenities. It's not a deal breaker for me or anything.
Yeah.
I was just curious.
well, I've seen one, we had one a few years ago where they had a pool that wasn't anywhere near, I don't remember what development what was about 4 or 5 years ago, but they had a rinky-dink little pool for, several hundred homes. And I think they ended up making it bigger or something. Is anybody interested in checking further in that to see if we ask staff to find out what's the standard size for a pool for X amount of homes? And I don't know if there's some kind of a standard. If you have 250 homes, like Robert says, you have an average of 1,000 people, and that requires X amount of size of a pool or something. I don't know
We'll
what,
ask Nick Lake about that. He's
Okay.
normally the person we go to with those types of questions.
So I think the population per household on average is going to be about 2.43.
yeah, whatever.
So even if it was 3, it'd be about 750 people.
Yeah.
So it might be a little
Yeah,
less
if
than
you'd
that.
ask Nick that, and anybody else have any questions for Rudy to find out about anything as far as the amenities, or?
I don't have any relative to amenities, but I do have about the action plan.
Ask you.
You indicated in your packet here that an action plan is going to be developed to provide effective citizen participation. And I noticed here a contact list will be developed, focused on 300 feet from this site.
Yes, and
that-
unfortunately, the only property owner within
I
300
was
feet of
going
state
to
land.
say that, because I live a fair distance well, not a fair distance, but I live a
Now,
distance away.
I believe
so-
they also posted a sign at Cortez and Baseline, so anybody who wants to come to this meeting is welcome to come to the
There
meeting.
is a sign that is there, that the property is being rezoned.
Yeah. Any other questions, comments, anything? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
sorry.
Nick?
The average lot size is 5,000, you said, 3,500?
No. 36 to 45.
With an average size of the house being 2,000?
No, the
No.
house sizes run from about
12.
1,200 to about 2,300, I think, is what the models show.
Yeah.
12 to 20.
And he's basically offering 3 different lot sizes. The, what's
Some of them are
his
too small.
narrative?
Yeah, a lot of the larger ones.
45 by 80, 50 by 80, and 45 by 100.
And the 2 stories, are they going to be the perimeter homes?
Not necessarily?
No.
Okay.
We usually require them to be further inside so they're not looking down somebody's
Right.
downstairs
By the pool.
by the pool.
So these lot sizes are big enough to put a pool in, I guess?
Some of them, yes.
Well,
In their own yards, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And he'll probably do something like he did with his last development. There would be one setback to the home and perhaps a different setback to the garage to kind of break up the streetscape a little bit. But like I said, I'll ask him for some lot exhibits that would show how some of these homes typically fit on the lots.
But that's where we also we can take these things that he provided and ask him to, what do you call them, bump outs and things like that on the houses so that they're not
Four-sided
just,
architecture, absolutely.
yeah, the architecture, so it's not just flat,
Right.
boring styles. That it? Anybody? Okay, we'll move on to information and reports. Do we have any?
Give me a second here. So again, just on the active transportation plan, we were at Festival of the Superstitions last weekend. This next weekend, we're going to be at the Health and Wellness Expo on Saturday at the MGC. So that's coming back here on January 8th, and then to the council after that. Other than welcoming Shirley, I don't know if that comes under 8 or 9, but I did want to welcome
Okay.
Shirley, and I don't know, I did thank Michael Franks personally, but I do appreciate Michael's service on the board as well, and he was at the FOTS, so I did get a chance to talk to him a little bit with his grandkids and stuff, so it's just, things change, people transition in and off the board, but it's always great to have new folks and helping out in the community, so.
Larry, there is the public meeting, I think.
Oh, yes,
the
I'm
28th,
sorry.
is that-
Yes, on the 28th, which is a Wednesday, at the MGC at 7 PM, we're going to have an open house kickoff meeting, if you will, for the general plan. So the website is kind of up and running. We were handing out postcards at the Festival of Superstitions. We'll have postcards for that. So there's a website that we're building and getting public input for the 28th. So I'm working with Al Bravo on a press release, so that hopefully will go in the paper next Monday or sooner online. So we're working on that as well. So then we're going to fine tune that schedule because we have another kind of public meeting in June, and then the idea would be to bring it through here kind of through the summer.
Okay,
Very good.
And I think that's all for kind of 8 and 9.
so that's 9 too, okay. I'll call for a motion for a meeting.
Unless Rudy
dates
wants to
then.
give a
Oh,
report on the conference he went to over the last week, he could give us a very detailed report of the state planning conference.
We have lots of time.
We could save that. Yeah, we got plenty of time, Rudy. So Rudy
It was
did,
great, it was cold, especially at night, it was up in Flagstaff.
Oh, in fact, I was going to ask you, where'd you go?
Yeah, it was up in Flagstaff. A couple of interesting sessions. I think the one that caught my attention the most was a session on sustainability and the things that different cities are doing to try and save energy, to cut down on the carbon footprint, everything from electric vehicles to recycling programs to LEED certified buildings. It was a really interesting session. There's a lot of ideas from going to all electric buses if we ever get a bus system, those kinds of things. So it was fun. It was a lot of good sessions, and it was nice to get up in the pines for a little bit.
Okay. Then I'll call for a motion for selection of meeting dates, times, and location.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I move that the Planning and Zoning Commission hold a Planning and Zoning Commission regular meeting on November 27th, 2018, at 7 PM in the City Council chambers located at 300 East Superstition Boulevard.
I have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Roll call vote, please, Rudy.
Commissioner Uli,
Yes,
Chairwoman Nesser.
Yes.
Commissioner Howard,
Yes,
Commissioner Schroeder.
Yes.
Vice Chair Heck,
Yes.
Commissioner McGraw,
Yes.
Commissioner Kreidler.
Yes.
So moved, Madam Chair.
Okay. Just as a reminder, I won't be here that night. My goddaughter's getting married on Tuesday, the 27th, so I won't be here.
You can postpone that, can't they?
The wedding?
Yeah, they can postpone.
Yeah, sure.
Request a continuance.
Can request a good-
Okay, it's now 8:45. I'll call for adjournment. Thank you, everyone. And if anyone is interested